and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are beginning our discussion on Women of Light by Kali Fajardo-Anstine. In this episode, we'll be talking about the first and the second half of the novel.
We're back. It's been a while. No, I know you missed us, dear listeners.
And you know who we missed even more?
Who?
Jorge.
Oh man, OG, classic, back on the show. So the question is then who's fired? Me? Oh, y'all look at me.
No, you asked the question. So we're like, oh no.
We're like thinking of who should it be?
So
Valentine.
It's nice and balanced now, you know? There's four of
I
us.
was going to say I have 4 mics, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
It works out.
Yeah.
All is balanced.
Yes.
Perfectly balanced.
There you go. I did the knife thing.
I know.
All right.
Yeah. It's good to have you here, Jorge.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Well, it's been a minute, right? I was looking, I think the last time I was here was like more than 2 years ago. Yeah. So
Well, we're back and
it's good to be back.
revisiting an artist that we've already discussed before,
Yeah.
which is always
Perfect.
familiar.
Yeah. But I want to say, you guys did an awesome job. So my props to you all. Really took it to another level. And really excited, to be back on and just talk about books and, been connecting with readers all over. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Really the things we really enjoy in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, shall we talk about what the book is, Vanessa?
Yeah, we can do that. So it's her first novel, because Sabrina and Karina was a collection of short stories. So this is a little different. It's a little bit of like a historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the only one talking.
It's a generational family.
Yeah, there's lots of timelines happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not linear or chronologically told, which, if you're taking breaks in between reading this novel, it can really get confusing. Rereading it the second time, it was a lot easier to follow because I wasn't taking so many breaks or reading other stuff or, so for me, it was easier to kind of figure out what was happening when, even though, she helps us out in the beginning of the chapters by telling us what year it is and where it is. But even that, like, it can still get a little confusing. So just, I guess a heads up, if you're like me and read other books simultaneously, maybe don't do that with Women of Light. Yeah, maybe just focus in on this one, I would say.
Really, book at one's challenge, impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also loosely based on her family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's something we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Loosely based, huh?
Oh, did you catch that?
Nice.
I'm just kidding.
Lots of loose puns, light puns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Borrowing from that tradition of the Western, right, and the historical fiction. I'm the only one, by the way. So I mentioned I'm the only one with you all have the hardback covers. So those were like the debut, right? The release.
OGs.
Yeah, the OGs. I'm the only one here with the paperback. And at that point, it has the national bestseller title on it.
But it's slightly different cover, nevertheless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
covers came.
That's a little later in the night. So guess she's written a little further
In the journey.
same landscape. Man, mine's a little bit more red and orange, and you guys have a deeper dark. The sky is darkening. But one of the other things we mentioned is something that's been added at the front is the map. Right? A nice map that's included. And one thing I remember is when Cormac McCarthy passed away, Kali made a post, talking about the map thing. McCarthy put maps in his books. I put a map in my book. So it was a cool little tribute, and it's fun. It reminds me of taking I think we were in that class together with Dr. Gunn.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the books dealt with with that as well, that historical. So yeah, I mean, I guess one thing we'll talk about is a lot of differences, right? The paperback and hardback.
Yeah.
Yeah. So apart from the map, she gives us dates, and then in the beginning of the book, she also tells us like
The family tree.
generations. Yeah, the family tree, which is also really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
If we need to come back and stuff, but yeah, so we have first generation Pardona Pueblo, second generation Pardona Pueblo and the Lost Territory, third generation the Lost Territory in Denver, Colorado, fourth generation Denver, Colorado, and fifth generation Denver, Colorado. So not only location, like spatial, but geographical. It's really cool. Just how much she's put into this, so that it's not just stories being told, but we can place them and map them, for lack of a better a better word. Yeah.
Pardona.
Did you all find it hard to follow the generations and stories, or?
I think the names, because some of them are similar, and also like thinking about the relationship to each other too. At first, yeah, and the ages,
names and ages. You know, the preface, that first part, right? Was it the prologue? Did she call it the prologue?
I think so. Yeah.
Just want to make sure. I want to make sure to use the right term that she used.
Yes.
yeah,
The prologue, yeah, the sleepy prophet. Bam. Honestly, yeah, you know what it started kind of what it got me a sense of was 100 Years of Solitude. That opening line just kind of there's a parallelism to that opening line of Marquez there. The night, Virtudes, Marisol Ortiz rode on horseback to the northern Pueblo Pardona. Secluded in Ma's village, the sky was so filled with stars, it seemed that they hummed. It just reminds me of like Colonel Arquedo Buendia taking the sea ice, right? Like, and so it's like it just has this feeling that it's going to be about family. You know, that memory here.
but I do like that prologue is the cover that you see there, so like it immediately gets into the gives us the picture, right, of and ultimately I think that does help, going back to what Reina said about we map the characters, we map the time, the place, and you literally have like a little not to get a little Ahsoka here, but like a star map of the setting, and also the connection to nature that is so important to the story.
The Sleepy Prophet. That's a cool name. Did you guys ever try that Wu-Tang name generator? That's kind of what it reminded me of. Because it would give you names like that.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking is Rob Santos, Mr. Rob Nice. I remember his generator name was the Lazy Scholar. And so,
Interesting.
like the Sleepy Prophet. Oh man, Wu-Tang name. Like,
Didn't Childish Gambino get his?
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're getting like
That's my fault. Sorry.
No, that's the CD Prophet. Yeah. So that's Vidre, right? Who I think is the baby.
The baby.
In the beginning of the story, and he's first generation, second generation, sorry, from the Pardona Pueblo. So yeah, we get a little bit of that story. And yeah, I think it is really cool to kind of, like Jorge mentioned, see the cover, and we're already, getting into the story of this mysterious woman who's riding on horseback with a baby in tow. Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
And it does bring to mind, you mentioned Cormac, the Western novels,
Yes.
And so I think as a work of like Southwest fiction, I think definitely puts you into the the mindset of the time, with all the discrimination that was going on, the segregation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that a lot of these themes and topics keep coming up in all the different generations. So that's also something that she does a lot in this novel is, obviously in some parts of the story, it has to do with like the clan and marches and other things. It's more, I don't know, location based, like
Police brutality, things,
disadvantages, like
gentrification.
gentrification.
Coming back to a lot of these, and it's even though it's historical, right? We, like you said, it's revisiting it, even though we're going to the past. Like that sounds familiar.
And did you guys notice some connections to Sabrina with the setting too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Specifically Cheeseman Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the graveyard there. And, yeah. So so as a work of, what do they call it again when like books talk to each other? The intertextuality.
Yeah,
Yeah. I thought that was neat. So like if you've already read Sabrina, I think this will be a little easier to follow, I think, because you'll recognize some of that.
Some of the places and
Even though it's like so many decades earlier.
right. I love also, I want to give Kali her flowers and saying like that I love how much she talks about where she's from and how it's just such a central focal point of her writing and the talks that she gives. She's a proud Colorado native, and she's always talking about like her indigenous roots and stuff. So you can really, really see that. I mean, in Sabrina and Corina and the stories there, but so much more, I think, in Women of Light too. Yeah, because I mean, and a lot of people, like when you were saying Cormac McCarthy, like there's a lot of authors that really do, use setting to their advantage and stuff. But I see Kali going beyond that. Like, just really, this is like a love letter to Denver and to family and generations and storytelling and oral tradition and all of these things, right, working together. So, it was nice just to read this. I hadn't read something like this in a while, probably since like college, I want to say, other than Sabrina and Corina. So, does this her storytelling style or attention to setting, does it bring up any other writers or books that you've read recently, other than those like connections to Cormac McCarthy?
Yeah, because I was thinking like McCarthy's someone who just did a prodigious amount of research in working on the novels, and that also found very, very similar. So she's talking about a different time period and the history of Denver, and just that felt very similar. But you said aside from that, so okay, marked.
Yeah, but even just thinking about that, like the work that goes into something like this. Writing about a different time period and based off of family members. I mean, yeah, that must have been a task.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's something we can ask her, like how hard this was in comparison, if it was difficult to write about this, or from these perspectives,
Yeah, my understanding is that she was working on this much longer than Sabrina and Corina. This was her first work that she started working on, and she put this aside, and then she started Sabrina and Corina in school when she was in the creative writing program, her second one, I think. And then found short stories like, hey, here's this one, and then she was able to come back to this. I think she mentioned like a decade she had been working.
Oh, really?
This. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of another lesson, something we've talked about with past books here on the show is for all the writers out there, to be patient. Sometimes it takes a while to fully put your work together and get it out there in the world. It's very easy to get frustrated or impatient, you know, like I gotta get that book out there. And when it did come down to it, I mean, I was listening to, I'm kind of filling in from what I remember from interviews that she's done talking about the book, pretty much. FYI, I just don't know these things, right? Like an assumption. No, I've heard her talk about these things, but when she finally signed the contract, you know, she said she got off of social media and, you know, if I was finally able to finish this project up. And again, just something that was a tribute to her family, and that felt so good for her, you know.
And I will say, as you know, having taught it before, that for those of you who are teachers out there, you know, high school or college level, I would suggest that you do give plenty of like historical context. And I think, you know, so in a Chicanx class, you know, that makes a lot of sense because you do talk a lot about the history. And so, that, you know, you'll have a book by, you know, the Maceo Montoya book on the Chicano movement. But outside of the Chicanx course, I think you can still, of course, do that. And, you know, because, yeah, I think, you know, if you guys go back to when you took history in college, you don't really cover too much of this period. Kind of just, at least not the West, you know, it's more focused on like the South and, you know, Reconstruction and the Civil Rights era. So
you do get that sense of, you know, what's happening with segregation and a lot of business owners putting shocking signs up, right? And that is something you can actually show through images, I guess, as like again, historical context. There's a famous one, like an El Paso business sign. No, I'm not going to read the names out loud, but there's a couple instances in the book, right, where they talk about the signs, like, and they just kind of run off a list of expletives or pejoratives. You guys know which image I'm talking about, though? There's one that by the way, my understanding is that sign is like a fake one, but it doesn't like mean that wasn't around. You know, that didn't happen.
you mean the one in El Paso that was purported to be here? Yeah.
Yeah, because it says El Paso, Texas down there. Like, I see it shared a lot on social media. When I remember someone had looked into it and like it was like a fake sign or they reproduced it. But like I said, yeah, it's just kind of more indicative or representative stuff that actually did happen, though, right? And yeah, so you see that kind of instance a couple times in here with like the segregation here in this area, because again, we don't really hear it or see too much when we study history.
And also, if you do have students read like Western novels, I like that this one doesn't romanticize it, you know, and so even like, of course, with film, you get a lot of that, you know, with, you know, cinema, right? Black and white cinema and even like recent cinema. So it is, you know, as it is like endearing, like reading about Luz and her family, you know, there's a lot of ugliness out there that I think can really bring about good discussion in the classroom, and especially now with like the whole controversies going on with like banning books, and you know, you were talking about the Brave Books thing that they're holding for banned books, and I can see this book being one of the ones that is banned because of that.
Sorry,
Really not, but
I get so aggravated. Like just the reason why, like we don't want to hear our history. It makes us feel bad. Like, what?
yeah, it's not like we're making any of this up. You know? It's like these things happen, and why not learn from them? But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, I agree with you, Jorge. That was something that I really appreciated too about this is we've read some historical fiction for the podcast in the past that kind of shows it in a different light. It wasn't a Western novel, but
Rina Gunan?
yeah, kind of to just look at those two. That one centered more like really specifically, literally on the romantic aspect of the story. not really romanticizing the war. I mean, it kind of did a little bit in parts, but yeah, this one was really staying true to speaking up and speaking out on the realities of what it was to live in that time.
And on that same vein, I was thinking back to the books that we've covered, and a lot of the books are similar, not necessarily in the setting, but in the what you said about like the speaking out. Like there's a lot of activist books that we read, like Poet X, Hate You Give, the Ron Klansman one, Ron Stallworth one.
Black Klansman.
I mean, it just goes on.
Yeah,
like
I mean, social, like a lot of them dove into social issues. Even Randy Ribai, right? Like what was going on in the Philippines, like
running also.
Right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So are we needing to change the title of Literally Literary to something dealing with activism? Is that what we're covering mostly? Or are those books that we're gravitating more towards, or because of the content, or
Maybe contemporary authors really want to address like these issues, in some way.
the Maurice Ruffin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that one called?
All They Will Call You?
All I Will Call You. No, that's
No, the love one.
30. No.
Oh my gosh, you guys, really? Come on.
Come on, Vanessa. No, Reese, Ruffin expert over here.
Scholar.
So, are we talking about the short stories?
Yes,
Yeah,
Yes.
the ones who don't say I love
the
you.
ones who didn't say I love you.
I still need to read that.
All I Will Call You is
Yeah, I don't know why I said that.
Yeah.
I remembered love.
We Cast a Shadow was too.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
that was the other one.
And 30 Talks Weird Love
Yeah.
is the one you were gonna bring up.
It's going there.
It's a lot of books. You guys.
With extra titles.
Yeah. It's like musicians with like their records and
Blurs together a little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. Like we gravitate towards that. We like reading about it because it's something that we are also passionate about. But it's nice and hopeful to see all these also contemporary authors speaking up about that stuff and not shying away from it, even with all these banned book things happening across the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just that natural impulse to want to fight it too, right? Fight the people who want to ban books, because ultimately they don't want us talking about this stuff. So it makes it even more important that we are, you know, and that it is in our art, it's in our books, in our content, like podcasts, and not ignoring it, but keeping the fight.
Mm-hmm. And so as the story goes on, so we get Pire and meeting Simo, right?
Simo
Deca Smith.
I heard her say it. Simo to say it. I don't know.
Simodesia,
Simodesia?
to say, but
Okay.
Salazar Smith and then Vidre Lopez.
You should see if there's any interviews where she mentions the characters' names.
And then, of course, Papaticas comes out soon after. Who I was, I don't know if you saw, but she posted that it's based on a historical figure also named Tikas, who was a Greek immigrant and who was killed in like some kind of massacre, actually, like a racially motivated one, racist one.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think there's a link here at the back. That's so weird to say. That's so weird to say.
The back of your print.
In the in my version, there's a reference guide. It says, check out the links below to learn more about the historical events that inspired Women of Light. So I believe I saw that earlier. Let's see. The Ludlow Massacre, is that one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it's one of those. It talks about the Ku Klux Klan, some lynchings, redlining in Denver, right? That political process. the Maestas case, desegregation in schools. Like, so there's a lot of like historically documented things, and it's one of the interesting things here is that they put like URLs, which is very. I don't see that. That's not a common thing. All right, sorry. But anyway, I just did want to mention that. I think that is if you do have the paperback version, you do have access to, and if you're teaching it, right, more importantly, you can incorporate these in lessons, right? A lot of the documented historical events that she uses as not as reference, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not a direct one-to-one, but she makes up some stuff that's similar to it in the story, right? So I didn't know about Tikas though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's Greek, right? So it would be nah. I don't know. Tikas probably makes sense for Greek too. Okay.
So, yeah, in the beginning of the book, we get also our first glimpse at Diego. After the prologue, we meet Luz, who's a protagonist, who he calls Little Light. Diego, the older brother, right? Who's a snake charmer. And Luz is reads tea leaves, which is also already really cool characteristics for both of them. Do you want to mention one of the snake's names is Reina, spelled differently, but that was pretty cool.
Do you feel seen?
I did.
I thought about that too when I read it. I was like, oh my God, Reina.
I wrote, we're so going to talk about this on the podcast. Well, it's cool. Like, I mean, that's such a cool element, though. Like as a characteristic, but like just the characters in the novel we're reading, and it kind of brings up a little bit of that magical realism that I enjoy from a lot of those novels. They have these powers,
Yeah.
these gifts.
Yeah, these gifts. And Luz's gift is extraordinary in and of itself because she's reading tea leaves, but she's seeing events that could have happened already or are possibly going to happen in the future. So they kind of also jump timelines, which is how the book is told. So that's where it can become a little confusing, but it's also really cool.
Yeah.
I noticed that did confuse a lot of people who read it. Right, they didn't pick up on that right away, so they didn't really vibe on it. But it's interesting. I like they mentioned that, right? The visions aren't. It's not clear if it's in the past or will happen or. But I mean, I guess that just kind of speaks also to our human nature. It could be either one, and based on like a lot of events that like happen that transpire, both good and bad, that just kind of because like the riot, the riot after the killing of this man, really brought back George Floyd reference, Black Lives Matter movement, fighting for justice for this very unjust murder by a police force, right?
Yeah.
Really brings up here in 2020 and onwards, that kind of like history repeats itself theme.
Yeah.
Turn the page.
I think something else that we kind of brought up a little bit is like the art of storytelling. And she even, the narrator calls it a gift at the beginning, like in the prologue. And I thought that was really cool. Even from Sabrina and Karina, like that was something that was really important for Kali, was just like the art of storytelling. And it's just something that she emphasizes a lot of the time. It was like cool to like see it continue through this novel.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of becomes like a meta aspect to the reading of it, right? Because this is Kali sharing the importance of storytelling, like by giving memory to her ancestors, but also in the book, the character is also like the storyteller, like needing to remember her ancestors as well, right?
Yeah.
Their stories, so there's layers happening there. Did you know loose means light? No, I'm kidding.
We also meet Lizette, who's the cousin I believe, and she and Luz are very close. So we see a lot of their bond throughout these stories. The sign you were talking about is on page 23.
Yeah, I just said it. Yeah. Damn.
I know, just looking at it, it's like, there are a lot of blatant examples of like racism and misogyny, but there's also a lot of not so obvious, more subtle ones that I think are also really crucial throughout these stories of, like you were talking about before the pre-show, Richie.
The show before the show.
When you're talking about like how predatory David was acting towards Luz, and we're never, I don't know if we're ever told how old David is, but we're kind of given an idea that he's in his 30s, and Luz is 17 when she starts working for him, and so he's not really doing, and in a couple of instances he is very obviously abusing and kind of like grooming and doing things like that, but in other moments it's more subtle, and she's even confused by it. So anyway, I thought it's important to also highlight those things that aren't as obvious.
And that's one thing maybe you kind of mentioned earlier, like Kali's not being like holding your hand, telling you like this is bad. It's like we're reading and experiencing it too.
Feel it. We're like, that something is off.
Yeah,
about
it doesn't
that,
feel right.
you know?
I mean, it probably should make you feel that way. But I guess that's the second part of I mean, it's true and throughout, but I guess where that leads.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting ahead.
No, it's fine.
Well, because I mean that's another thing about the structure, right? It's like it does go back and forth in time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going with Kali's structure here, fourth time as well.
Me too. Should we start with maybe what happens to Diego? Maybe that.
Yeah.
Because the story starts with him leaving, so that's an important integral. I hate that word.
Integral. You know what? I messed it up a lot too.
You know what I mean.
That and accompaniment. Accompaniment. What? I did that to myself.
So what happens to Diego, Vanessa?
He is.
Why does he?
Are we doing that? Am I saying it out loud for everybody? He's attacked. Okay.
But why is he attacking them?
Am I also saying why?
Are we not doing
Do we even
spoilers?
want them to read it? I'm just kidding.
That's true.
No, I'm just kidding. Should I say why?
Forced to.
He's forced to leave town,
Yeah.
essentially, after he's attacked.
Yeah, I guess that's good. We don't have to really get too into it if you don't want to.
Do we want to? Oh, everybody wants to? Okay. Yeah. So they're at a party. And Luz just gets a really bad feeling all of a sudden. So she steps outside, and that's when she sees that her brother's being attacked. Yeah, and then they kind of just leave him there. He's not unconscious, but he's not really conscious either. Yeah, and then I guess after he heals up a little bit is when he's sent away. Which kind of really affects Luz a lot. Since they came into the city together when they were really small.
And we learn about that later in the novel, like how they came to be here together. But why does he get attacked, and by whom?
So it's one of the many aspects, right? We were going to kind of explore, right? Of like, it's not a perfect place, right? And segregation, you also have a lot of fear, which turns to anger. And I'm trying to do a Star Wars thing.
Anger leads to
Yeah, I know, but dang it, why Star Wars? But essentially, it's a hate crime, right? Because he's white woman. It makes me think of Emmett Till. His lynching, because he was flirting with a white woman, which I think they proved was wrong after so many years. But anyway, yeah, it's a reaction to miscegenation or kind of one of the first social topics we encounter in this book. I was looking for this section. But it's Maria, right, who sends him away, essentially.
Josie. Yeah.
Yeah. And she talks about it on.
Just finding myself jumping around a lot on this.
So the girl is Eleanor Anne.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a white woman that Diego is with. And she gets her leaves read by Luz, and Luz has a bad feeling about it, which is what Vanessa was talking about. So yeah, it's like this whole unraveling of something's gonna happen, and there's a brick involved, and men and violence, and but she doesn't know it is about Diego, and yeah, so that's a really kind of brutal attack against him. The men were her brothers, or were they, or they
think
just
they
saw
were.
them together and were like, we don't like this.
It's her brothers and her father.
Okay. Yeah, I thought.
And then, well, it kind of talks about it like from a little bit before chapter 6, and then chapter 6 is when he's sent away.
Yeah.
There's this scene where he's laid across the table, and they're working on his injuries and stuff, and just kind of reminds me of that scene in Inglourious Bastards. After she gets shot in the leg. You guys remember that scene? But she's on the table too, and they're kind of like, anyway. I was just thinking of that, like, oh man, it's brutal. He's bleeding. They're like stitching him up and stuff. Trying to figure out like what's next, for him and for the family, because it really is. It's not just an attack on him; it's an attack on their family.
Yeah.
So I think that's why Maria Josie decides to send him away to protect himself, but to protect themselves too.
Yeah. And she kind of talks about it a little bit, like before on page 50, she says, I said you could stay with me if you were good people, pulled your weight, weren't hurtful or cruel because of the fate befallen you. So that's kind of why she sent him away. But then at the same time, when they're like stitching him up and everything, Eleanor shows up, Eleanor Ann. And Maria Josie talks about how her family could have followed her there and like shown them where they live, and like how much more dangerous it is with him there, and just having everybody know where they live.
And so, of course, Diego leaving kind of forces Luz to find more income, right? Which kind of leads her to finding work at the law firm. No, the
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
office.
With David.
I was going to say the nonprofit. The sleepy nonprofit.
Yeah, and she doesn't know how to type or anything like that, but she can translate, which I think is a huge advantage, right? Always trying to, especially us being here on the border, like we could speak both languages, a lot of us can. And it being an advantage for us, not just in jobs or anything, but with her, like he had the degree. He was like the Greek accomplished, but he still needed help, from the 17-year-old girl, translating legal documents and speaking to families who only spoke Spanish or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we talk about, right? In a lot of our readings with like first generation, second generation, immigrants or children of immigrants, right? Serving as that role. So it's interesting to hear it in this
Yeah.
context too, right? I'm just trying to think what's happenings in sections 1 and 2, parts 1 and 2.
Well, it also goes back to with Pidre
Yes.
and then Simo, with him getting the theater, and then there's a whole scene about the Jack Wesley's Wild West show in Animas.
Yeah.
William Tell overture.
Yeah. That part was cool. I was kind of hoping for more of that.
That was a common thing I've seen people so far like, I wish we could have like dived a little bit more into like them too and like their ongoings, and I guess this is just loose experiencing these things, right?
Was Simo the sharpshooter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole story with the bear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that part was really cool.
Yeah, that was my William Tell reference. Shooting the. And they used like a fake article or a little article there that she threw in there.
Yeah.
Was it fake?
No, I don't know why I said fake. I mean, that sounds so weird. Like, unless it did come out in newspaper, I'd love to. Hold on, let me look back at the links in the back of the book. It's just fun to say. Like, let me look at the links in the back of the book.
Yeah. Well, it's on page 70. I don't know if there was another one before that. I think that might have been it. No.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember reading that.
sharpshooters has been met horrible death.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Wesley's Wild West show.
Yeah, it's so that's section ends up with Peter recruiting Simo to be part of his show. And at first, she's kind of a little hesitant, and she seems like very independent, of course, and
Let's see, when did that happen?
in the 1890s.
1892. It's the lost territory.
Yeah. One thing about that section that I had annotated that was interesting about the Wild West show is, going back, we talked about how with Cormac, he does a lot of like deconstruction of the Western, and here you kind of see a little bit of that too, because while it does show you like kind of like counter narratives in the sense that you're getting perspectives from the underrepresented indigenous or Latino population, at the same time you also see the perspective of the imperialists and how it was that they were creating this myth about the West and the exploration and subjugation, not just of people but of nature, right? Like the bear and etc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The poor little bear.
I was sad about that part.
Yeah.
But that kind of reminded me of this other quote that I like, going back into like storytelling, but also what you were just talking about, Jorge. On page 73. This is still like taking place at the Wild West show. And it's Pedro thinking to himself. It says, he couldn't help but think that Anglos were perhaps the most dangerous storytellers of all, for they believed only their own words. They allowed their stories to trample the truths of nearly every other man on earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was one of my, like, I started that one.
Yeah. And it goes back to that, right? That like the circus, the theater, all these public venues became ways for them to reinforce the hegemony, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that.
And now banned books and history textbooks.
Wait,
Yeah.
not that way. Not this way. It's like the journals of John Smith, right? From Pocahontas, right? That guy was like the biggest narcissist, right? They used a lot of his stuff for basis on like his heroic character and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
dangerous storytellers.
Again, bringing importance to Lewis's storytelling and sharing, continuing to share every generation. And by extension, Kali doing that with the novel too. I think that's a common thread. We always talk about like the importance of sharing our stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have one more part that I wanted to talk about.
Go for it.
I think we focused a lot on like talking about men and like how terrible they are. And I'm just kidding. No,
Why'd you look at me like that?
just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I feel like my point is that I think it also does like a lot of empowering women and like showing the importance of women and just their strength overall. When David tells Luce that she has to start taking classes and that she's like picking up everything so fast, he kind of tries to tell her that she should go back to school, but she reflects on like this idea that all her life she's been learning and that all the women around her have been doing the same thing and they've taught themselves how to do everything and like without school.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really
That's such Kali too, because she dropped out and got her GED, right? And that's such a huge part of like her story, where now she's teaching at Texas State on an appointment, and so her education background is non-traditional in the academic sense, and that's kind of like that, what's trying to like judge people off of like their educational backgrounds, right? But you can get educated in many ways, and great experiences. So
I have That comes up again later. Vanessa, on page 230, I wrote in my notes where they talk about an old kind of intelligence. Like, again, like,
Yeah.
which I love. And we've talked about in previous podcasts just about like how the elders can give so much knowledge, and a lot of them have, no educational background, as they say, quote unquote, but
Yeah.
they know everything in terms of like remedies, like she talks about in Sabrina and Corina, and all these things that for survival, right? Where might not know how to type a document, but I know how to save you if you get bitten by this rattlesnake.
Yeah.
How to
Those
use
kinds of things.
of the land to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which takes me back to the classic Chicano novels of Rodolfo Naya and not Chicano but like Ceremony also. Silco.
And I think it was Silko who said like, we're nothing without our stories. Emphasizing also the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good bookend for this first section, right?
How perfect.
Yeah, perfect circle. And I think we're gonna continue that with part 2 which is next.
Oh yeah,
Next
that's
episode.
next. That's coming up, guys.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Senses. In this episode, we began our discussion on Women of Light by Kali Fajardo-Anstine. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode and follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.